The 9/11 Commission report is 585 pages long. It took 2 years to write. It involved 1,200 interviews in 10 countries. It is the most comprehensive investigation into a terrorist attack in American history. And according to the people who wrote it, it's incomplete. Not because they ran out of time, not because the evidence wasn't there, but because key sections were classified, buried, or politically off-limits. This is what they left out. Let's start with the most uncomfortable question. Did anyone know it was coming? The answer, buried deep in declassified intelligence records, is yes, repeatedly, from multiple directions. The CIA had been tracking al-Qaeda's growing threat since 1999. In the summer of 2001 alone, the agency's own internal memos described the threat level as, quote, at a historical high. On July 10th, 2001, 2 months before the attacks, CIA Director George Tenet and his counterterrorism chief held an emergency meeting with National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. They told her al-Qaeda was planning a major attack, imminent, possibly inside the United States. Rice listened. But according to the 9/11 Commission, she took no significant action. Then on August 6, 2001, President Bush received his presidential daily briefing. The title of that memo, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. Bush was on vacation in Texas. He reportedly told the CIA briefer, "All right, you've covered your ass." Then he went fishing. And it wasn't just the CIA. In the months before September 11th, intelligence warnings came from at least 12 different countries: Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Germany, Russia, Morocco, and more. Israel's Mossad reportedly gave the CIA a list of 19 suspects living in the United States who were believed to be planning an imminent attack. 4 of the names were actual hijackers. Russia's Vladimir Putin personally called President Bush to warn him that something large was being planned. The Afghan Northern Alliance's leader, Ahmad Shah Massoud, traveled to Europe to warn Western governments of a massive al-Qaeda plot on U.S. soil. 2 days later, al-Qaeda assassinated him as if to silence the warning before it could land. Inside the United States, FBI, Special Agent Kenneth Williams sent a memo to FBI headquarters in July 2001, known as the Phoenix Memo, warning that suspicious Middle Eastern men connected to al-Qaeda were attending flight schools in Arizona. He explicitly recommended a nationwide investigation into flight school students. FBI headquarters did nothing. Of all the intelligence failures before 9/11, this one is the most staggering. On January 5, 2000, 2 men, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdar, attended a known al-Qaeda planning summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The CIA had them under surveillance. 10 days later, both men flew directly into Los Angeles International Airport, under their real names. What happened next is almost impossible to believe. Between 50 and 60 CIA officers read classified cables about these 2 men, including the fact that one of them had a valid U.S. visa. Nobody added them to the government's watch list. Nobody told the FBI. Nobody tried to find them. Once inside California, the 2 men were not hard to find. They rented an apartment under their real names, got California driver's licenses, opened bank accounts, took flight lessons. One of them, al-Mihdar, even listed himself in the local phone directory. The CIA did not alert the FBI until August 24, 2001, 18 days before the attacks. The CIA's own Inspector General concluded that, and I'm quoting from the Declassified report, informing the FBI and good operational follow-through might have resulted in surveillance of both men. Surveillance, in turn, would have had the potential to yield information on flight training, financing, and links to others who were complicit in the 9/11 attacks. In plain English, if the CIA had just told the FBI what it knew, 9/11 might have been stopped. Nobody at the CIA was fired. Here's something the 9/11 Commission report was very careful about. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens. Osama bin Laden was Saudi. Al-Qaeda was funded primarily through Saudi networks. Even yet, the US-Saudi relationship was barely examined. In 2002, a joint congressional investigation into 9/11 produced an 838-page report. 28 pages of it were entirely blacked out, classified at the personal insistence of President George W. Bush. For 13 years, families of 9/11 victims fought to have those pages released. In 2016, the pages were finally declassified. They detailed connections between the hijackers and individuals linked to the Saudi government, including 2 Saudi nationals who the FBI believed may have been government intelligence agents. One of them, Omar al-Bayoumi, had been described by the 9/11 Commission as a gregarious man who coincidentally befriended two of the hijackers after a chance meeting in a restaurant. The declassified FBI report tells a different story. A witness said al-Bayoumi was waiting by the window, watching for the hijackers to arrive. The meeting was not a coincidence, it was pre-planned. Al-Bayoumi helped the two hijackers find housing in San Diego, opened a bank account for them, and introduced them to the local Saudi community. The pages also put a spotlight on Prince Bandar, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Washington for 22 years, nicknamed Bandar Bush for his close friendship with the Bush family. His wife, Princess Haifa, had been sending regular payments to the wife of a Saudi student in California. That student had extensive contacts with two of the hijackers. A phone number connected to Bandar's organization was found in the address book of a captured al-Qaeda operative. The 9/11 Commission said there was no evidence this money was redirected toward terrorism. Critics noted the Commission never fully pursued the lead. Commission member Bob Kerry said it plainly, "Evidence relating to the plausible involvement of possible Saudi government agents in the 9/11 attacks has never been fully pursued." On August 16, 2001, 26 days before the attacks, the FBI arrested a French-Moroccan man named Zacharias Moussaoui at a flight school in Minnesota. His instructors had flagged him to the FBI because he was paying $8,000 in cash for flight simulator training, had no aviation background, and only wanted to learn to steer a jumbo jet, not take off or land. The FBI agent who arrested him, Harry Samit, believed he was planning to hijack a plane. He sent 70 separate communications to FBI headquarters requesting a warrant to search Moussaoui's laptop and belongings. FBI headquarters said no, by insufficient probable cause. Inside Moussaoui's laptop, investigators later found connections to Ramzi bin al-Shibh, one of the key 9/11 coordinators. They found financial ties to the plot. They found enough to unravel the entire operation. At his sentencing trial in 2006, the FBI agent who arrested him testified that headquarters' refusal to authorize the search was, in his words, criminal negligence. CIA Director George Tenet was briefed on the Moussaoui arrest on August 23rd under a presentation literally titled, "Islamic Extremist Learns to Fly." No action was taken. We all know the broad shape of what happened on September 11th, 2001. 4 commercial planes hijacked, 2 into the Twin Towers, 1 into the Pentagon, 1 United Flight 93 brought down in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back, 2,977 people killed. The deadliest terrorist attack in history. But here's what's less known. The US military had a system designed to intercept hijacked aircraft, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Standard protocol was that fighter jets could be scrambled within minutes of a hijacking alert. On September 11th, the FAA took 18 minutes to notify NORAD after the first plane was hijacked. By the time fighter jets were scrambled, the first tower had already been hit. For the 4th plane, United 93, NORAD was not notified until after it had already crashed. The Commission's investigation into the military's response was described by its own co-chair as a potential candidate for criminal referral to the Justice Department for possible perjury by Pentagon officials before political pressure caused the referral to be dropped. United Flight 93 is a story of extraordinary courage. After learning via phone calls to their families what had happened to the other planes, the passengers voted to fight back. They stormed the cockpit. The hijackers crashed the plane into a Pennsylvania field rather than let passengers retake control. The intended target, almost certainly the US Capitol building, was spared. These were ordinary people who made an extraordinary decision with no preparation and no training. In the darkest moment of that morning, they were the ones who acted. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, something strange happened. Within days of the attacks, the US government began quietly flying Saudi nationals, including members of the bin Laden family, out of the United States on private jets. This happened at a time when all commercial US air traffic had been grounded. The 9/11 Commission said this was approved by the FBI and posed no security risk. But a later investigation by the 9/11 Commission's own staff found the FBI had not in fact cleared many of those flights. The 9/11 Commission was supposed to be the definitive investigation, but its own members later described it as deeply compromised. Commission co-chair Lee Hamilton said the White House obstructed the investigation at multiple points, withholding documents and limiting access to witnesses. Commission member Max Cleland resigned in protest, saying, "I'm not going to be part of a whitewash." The White House initially refused to allow National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice to testify under oath. Public outrage eventually forced them to reverse course. President Bush and Vice President Cheney agreed to speak to the commission, but only together. Not separately, and not under oath, and with no transcript. And then there's the story that took the longest to be told. The thousands of firefighters, police officers and rescue workers who spent weeks at Ground Zero breathing toxic air were told by the EPA that the air was safe. It wasn't. Over the following years and decades, thousands of first responders developed cancers and respiratory diseases. Many died. For years, Congress refused to fund their health care. It took Jon Stewart, a TV comedian, publicly shaming senators on the steps of Congress in 2019, to finally pass the permanent 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. On September 18, 2001, 1 week after the attacks, Congress passed the authorization for use of military force. It was a blank check for war. It authorized the president to use force against any nation, organization, or person connected to 9/11. No sunset clause, no geographic limit, no definition of what connected to meant. By 2017, that single piece of legislation had been invoked to justify U.S. military action in at least 14 countries. America invaded Afghanistan in October 2001. The Taliban government fell within months. Osama bin Laden escaped into Pakistan, where he would live for nearly a decade before being killed in 2011. Then, in 2003, the Bush administration invaded Iraq. The stated reason: weapons of mass destruction and links to al-Qaeda. Post-invasion investigations found no WMDs, found no operational link between Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda. Found, in the words of one bipartisan commission, of no credible evidence the connection existed. The war cost over 4,500 American lives, an estimated 200,000 Iraqi civilian lives, and more than $2 trillion. At home, the USA Patriot Act was passed 45 days after 9/11. Senators were given hours, not days, to read it before voting. It dramatically expanded the government's ability to surveil its own citizens' phone records, emails, library books, financial transactions, without a warrant. In 2013, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed the true scale of what had been built: a secret mass surveillance program that collected data on hundreds of millions of ordinary Americans who had nothing to do with terrorism. The architects of 9/11 wanted to change America. They didn't do it with box cutters. America changed itself. Here's where we are in 2025. A civil lawsuit by 9/11 families against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is still active in US federal court, and new evidence continues to emerge through that legal process. In 2022, the FBI released a 510-page document from its investigation into Saudi connections to the hijackers. It found, in its own words, a 50-50 chance that a Saudi national had advanced knowledge of the attacks. The documents are still being declassified. The files are still being released. New details still surface. 24 years after the attacks, the full story has still not been told. Who exactly funded the hijackers inside the United States? The Commission said it couldn't determine the answer. Did any foreign government have advanced knowledge? Still legally contested. Why did the CIA fail to tell the FBI about 2 known al-Qaeda operatives for 18 months? The officers involved were never charged, never fired, and some were promoted. Why were the 28 pages classified for 13 years? The government said national security. Critics say it was to protect a diplomatic relationship. What's still in the files that haven't been released? The official story of 9/11 is not wrong. Al-Qaeda planned it. 19 men carried it out. Osama bin Laden ordered it. That is true. But the full story, the story of ignored warnings, known terrorists allowed to enter the country, classified connections to a foreign government, obstructed investigations, first responders abandoned by Congress, and 2 wars built on false pretenses, that story has been told only in fragments, in declassified documents released years too late, in civil lawsuits that are still ongoing. And the 9/11 Commission's own co-chairs wrote a book after it was published saying they had been set up to fail. The families of 2,977 people have spent over 2 decades just trying to get the full truth. They deserve it, and so do you. If this video changed how you see something, subscribe to Unburied History. This is exactly what we're here for.